people do skim, people do take commissions. And I think there's a sense of like, that's okay, but where the line is it's constantly negotiated, and it's very messy.
Hello, welcome to our Common Concerns podcast. I'm Xiang Biao, a co-director of the Max Planck Institute for Social Anthropology in Halle, Germany. This podcast is part of our effort of developing the Common Concerns approach. What is the Common Concerns approach? This is an approach with which we want to do type of research that our interlocutors will find the concepts, perspectives, or questions that come from this research relevant to their concerns in everyday life. They will say, wow, this is something that have worried us, but we have not thought of that in this way. And with this concept from the research, I feel that I understand what is the origin of the concerns, and I can clarify to myself my living conditions, and therefore probably I can find a way to act on my life in these particular circumstances under which I'm living. So the reason that we wanted to promote this type of research, basically, we define the research agenda not according to the latest academic fashions, but try to address what worries the people to our interlocutors, not only about them, is because we realized that in the 21st century, we are doing social research in a very different circumstances than in probably just 20 or 30 years ago. The massification of the higher education, especially the global south, means that the public are receiving the much higher education level than before. And now also because of the advancement in the communication technology, they have unprecedented access to information, to opinions. So they have lots of questions about their life, but they do not expect experts just give them simple answers to tell them some simple truths. I mean, if we do that, they will not believe it. They are not going to take it. What do they want, as I see it, is some useful tools for thinking, some concepts or questions that help them to clarify the situations to themselves. And therefore, they can think for themselves and find a way forward in their own ways. So therefore, the Common Concerns approach is meant to be a type of research that is suitable for the times that we are living now. So Common Concerns approach is ideally will be an exercise of co-thinking and co-researching with our interlocutors. The Common Concerns approach, of course, is something relatively new to all of us here. So most of research projects in our department, the Department of Economic Experimentation, started well before we started thinking of the Common Concerns approach. Now we're experimenting whether the Common Concerns approach as an analytical strategy can be applied after we have done the most of field work, after we have started our project for whatever reasons and following whatever original research questions, whether we can foreground our interlocutors' concerns and use that to reinterpret our data, or you can say remine our data, and to see whether we can gain some understanding from that and whether we can raise new questions from that. So this is really experimental, and we have this podcast series is precisely to share this type of conversation. In our institute, we all bang our heads together to think whether or not this is a way to go forward. And now through this podcast, we also probably invite you to join this collective thinking. So today, I'm very pleased to have two of my colleagues join me to discuss together about the common concern approach focused on one very specific ethnographic research. And this research is about land transaction in Kathmandu. It's done by our colleague, Drew. And then we have another colleague, Xenia, join us, actually as a kind of, not host, the host is me, but she will lead the discussion. So now I hand over to you, Xenia.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Biao. Drew, I'm so excited to talk to you about your work. It's awesome. Yeah. But I want to start first with the question of common concerns, because that's what brings us here today.
Yep.
And the common concern that you specified is suspicion.
Yes.
So could you tell us about suspicion and why that is a common concern?
Right. So, okay. So suspicion, I mean, it comes out of my research, obviously, but I'm glad Biao made the point that this is research that was done before I joined this department, right? So this was research that I did a couple summers afterwards or a few month projects, but most of it was done ahead of time. I did not think about suspicion when I was doing it the first time. I've used suspicion as a way to kind of bring together a sort of a constellation of different affects and emotions and thoughts about the land market in a way that I think makes it kind of legible to people who I talked to or the people I worked with. I mean, basically, the reason I centered on suspicion, the reason I've decided it is that I did my research on the land market and mostly in post-earthquake Kathmandu. So the Great Nepal earthquake happened in 2015. I did my research from 2012 to 2017, with most of it 2015 to 2017. And I did a lot of following brokers, following families who are selling their land, like following sort of different land development projects, along with like earthquake reconstruction. And what I noticed is that when people talk about the land market and they talk about like land, on the one hand, everyone's very familiar with it. Everyone buys and sells land. That's a very normal thing to do. On the other hand, people are deeply, deeply suspicious of the entire apparatus about it, about who's conducting it. There's this idea of like what they say, the land mafia, the bui mafia, which is sometimes when people talk about it, it's kind of a actual organization. And I think other parts of South Asia will talk about like an actual organization of the underworld. In Nepal, though, it ends up being more of this sort of like loose conspiratorial group of people who are controlling the market. It's where money disappears. It's where political corruption happens. And it's a lot. I got really into studying land brokers, sort of the informal people who move back and forth. And people, people look at these people with like a deep suspicion of their motivations for a variety of reasons. So that is sort of where I kind of settled on this idea of suspicion and to kind of figure out what about the land market is suspicious.
Let me ask you then, before we get into suspicion, so why is selling land a problem to begin with? I mean, it seems like, it's not a problem as much other places. Is there something specific to Kathmandu?
Yes. I mean, that's a great question because it's, on the one hand, like, again, I have to stress how mundane it is. Like, people buy and sell land all the time. So it's weird. There's always been this contradiction of like, it's such a mundane activity, and yet there's so much anxiety and suspicion surrounding it. I could say there's two main reasons. The first is that land in Kathmandu has gotten incredibly expensive over the last 20 to 30 years. This has to do with the Maoist war that happened from 1996 to 2006, where thousands of people migrated into the city, bringing whatever capital they wanted, building houses, buying up land. But mostly it has to do with remittances. It's like Nepal makes about 30% of its GDP through remittances. And a surprising percentage of that goes into the Kathmandu land market.
It's like an investment bubble, basically.
It's an investment bubble, but it's an investment bubble that never pops. And I've
interesting. That's
talked about this. I've written about this before, but if you talk to people about land, they will say the land price has never gone down. And when I started,
and that's true.
What?
And that's true.
Well, when I started my research, there had been a land bubble crash. But even then, I would ask people like, okay, what's the price of land now? They're like, oh, land hasn't gone down in price. It's just no one's buying right now. So there's this way of talking around it and make sure that the land stays at least the same amount of price or goes up. And that has been the case for 30 years. What this means, though, is that like land prices outpaced income by about 4 to 5 times. So Nepal's that's almost like that kind of Thomas Piketty idea of like the asset society. Kathmandu is becoming sort of an asset society where land is becoming increasingly important. And this is complicated for a few reasons. One, there's just the practical question of like, how do you access that money? Like you can sell the land, but then it's gone. Yeah. You can collateralize the land, but then you owe a loan. You can rent it, but then you get into this other discussion of rent is considered sort of low class. Like you don't, people, in my experience is that people would often hide the rental income, like they were clear about it. But if you were to talk to people like, where does the money come from? They're like, oh, it's my son who works at this, bank, and my other, my daughter works there and I work, at this, but that, if you do, the actual numbers are such that that's only a small percentage of their income. Most of it's rent.
Interesting.
And, there's another anthropologist, Laura Conruther, writes about this, where it's you living off land, rent or otherwise, or it's considered kind of a backwards way to doing it. You want to live off your, professionalized white collar income, and families have invested very heavily into like their children.
But then if you sell the land and you make that capital, you liquidate it, that's okay.
That's fine. That's weird, right? Like it doesn't.
Yeah.
And I think it's like it's liquidated is fine if you use it as investment. Like there's lots of like morality tales of people who sell their land and then, buy motorcycles and TVs and drink it away. And then they're destitute and everyone's terrified of that. And, but if you take the land and you sell it and you reinvest it in a new business and, then that's fine. Or if you play in the land market, that's fine. So that's the first thing. So on one hand, you don't know how to access it. There's all this, both for like cultural reasons and just the practicalities of it. And the other big problem is that land is family owned. So everyone in the family, everyone in the family, according to Nepal law, has an equal right to the land. And that's defined very patrilineally. So that's, all men, all unmarried daughters, spouses of said men all have, and then we can have a long discussion about women's rights on land, but that's maybe a separate topic. Yeah. They all have an equal right, which means every single transaction has to be approved. You cannot sell land without it.
Wow.
And those rights are ongoing forever.
And they have an equal share.
Everyone has an equal share.
Wow.
And those rights exist up until the point where you divide the property.
And how many people are in these families? Like how big are they?
I mean, you can have like, it's a joint family. So, it's like, you have like 3 brothers. So you have like, parents, 3 brothers, their spouses, their kids. But then, so, I don't know, 20-ish, I guess.
It's a lot of people.
It's a lot of people. Yeah. But then what happens is families those rights last up until the point where you legally divide the land. You go to the land office and say like, okay, we're all going to divide it up into equal portions and that's fine. If you don't do that, and a lot of families don't because it's very stressful, then those rights will go on generation to generation. And if you die with rights, they will get passed on to your kids. So there becomes this whole kind of long dangling threads of unclosed
because people don't
rights.
keep up with the bureaucracy.
They don't keep up with the bureaucracy. So it's like you have this, so that becomes the other layer to this, where it's just this, bureaucratically it's very complicated, family's very complicated, just economically it's complicated.
And that's where the broker comes in.
This is where the brokers come in. Exactly. Yeah. So what the brokers do is, a broker in the most typical sense is just going to be the person who brings the buyer and seller together. You have a broker for the buyer, broker for the seller. Usually you have a lot of other brokers in between. There's no licensing for this. It's entirely informal. I actually went to a really weird, one of the bigger developers had, they had a whole course for brokers that was actually quite expensive. They're going to like train you to be a broker and give you a license, and the license was totally worthless. Yeah. And I have no idea. I know why I did it. I have no idea why anyone else was there. Anyway, but like, so it's totally informal. You create, and then that's the obvious job that they do, but they have a secondary profession, which is sort of as a bureaucrat. And I think, Biao, at some point you said to me that brokers are bureaucrats. And I think that's very the case here, where they're the ones who are going to, their job is to make this land into a commodity. Otherwise they can't get it sold. And that means getting everyone in the same page, deciding to sell it, making sure all the bureaucracy is put together. If like the land hasn't been divided, they have to get into it and make it divided. And this gets even more complicated because a lot of times the brokers are working for the developer.
Oh, interesting.
So the broker is now going to come to a family that the developer's already decided, I need this land to make my big development. And so they have to buy that land. So now the broker has to convince that family and make that to sell the land, which means getting everyone on the same page and also convincing them and, making sure that all the rights are in order so you can legally transact it.
Something similar in Russia, actually, with collective apartments.
Oh, yeah?
Like communal apartments, people would privatize and just have the rooms. And sometimes they weren't so privatized, they were like state-owned. And if somebody, like a rich person, wants to buy the entire apartment, then you've got to make deals with all the individual people and get them to
sign off. Yeah,
it's
exactly, very, very similar.
But it's different because these people aren't in family relationships.
Right.
Family relationships seems like it would make it much more difficult.
Yeah.
Can I just chip in to clarify? Where the suspicion comes in, presumably the people who sell the land or now are being persuaded to sell land know there is a developer who wanted to buy the whole plot of land, and therefore they ask some brokers to do the business. And which part the people have some doubt about?
So that's a great question. So suspicion comes in two main ways. The first is that the brokers are seen have a certain reputation for turning family members against each other. Right. So it's like, especially in cases where a developer is trying to buy up the land, I do know brokers who will do things such as like give the son a motorcycle or promise the son a motorcycle if he could convince his dad to sell the land, like things like that. But they can also use, the other techniques as well. I knew one broker who would find, for example, in the land title that the land was written down as smaller than it actually was. And so they would go to the owner and say, well, you don't actually own all this land. So you can either sell it to us or we can take this to court. It was a bluff, but it's a powerful bluff. So, but they have this.
Wait, that was a forged document?
No, that was just correct. It just happens to be that he was using land bigger than what he was on selling the thing. So that's not so much family, but what happens is a lot of fights break out over land ownership. And family fights, in my experience, have always been like, there's often a broker somewhere, rumored to be somewhere in the mix, right? So there's often like, someone will be, there'll be a fight where I was like, oh, my brother's being a jerk, he's trying to get the land. It's because he's been talking to some broker. And that also happens with these, when there's the claims go for generations. So someone will come out of the woodwork and say oh, my great-grandfather had claim to this land and you never gave it to him and now I'm going to sue you. And it's always oh, there's a broker in there. So that's the first thing, is that brokers are seen as turning family against each other. The second thing is that they're seen as stealing, as basically capturing money without admitting to it. Or basically capturing money that shouldn't be theirs. So a broker, obviously gets paid for
overcharging, or
sort of. So the way brokers usually make their money through commission, so that's 5%. But there's a lot of techniques that brokers can use to make money on margin, and margin means that I go to Xenia's land. I'm like, okay, I will find someone. How much do you want to sell the land for? You say 5,000. I'm like, great. I will find someone for 5,000 for this land, and then I go and find someone for 10. And then, there's different ways to go about doing this. Sometimes Xenia might know I'm doing it. Sometimes you might not know I'm doing it. Sometimes the buyer might know, they might not know. Sometimes if I'm really tricky, I will also charge you commission. So it's 5,000 plus my 5%, and I'm going to sell it for 10. That's hard to do. And so it's they're seen as as skimming, skimming more than is allowed.
Double.
Double, if you can. And especially,
do you know such cases?
Was that?
Do you know such cases?
Yeah. I know. But I know a lot more cases where brokers tried to do that and failed. I know a lot of cases where brokers didn't quite manage to do it, but they were trying to do something like this.
Did they get in trouble?
No, they never. This doesn't happen. And a lot of it comes down they need they put down an advance. They didn't have the money for the advance. And, and so and it's interesting because the way you do that is you do it by taking control of the land. So it's not your land, but you get leverage over it. You proxy control of the land itself. And by doing that, and then you sell the land as if you're the owner. And many brokers will lie about this, in fact. Like the brokers will give you, one of the hard parts of trying to figure out the land market, even for brokers, is that people will say, I'm the owner, when they're not the owner. They're actually the broker, but they don't want you to know that there's an owner behind them, because then you could circumvent.
That sounds like a financial instrument. What is it called? Selling on margin?
Wasn't
it like the thing that shorted the stock market in 2008? Something like that.
Oh, that one. I'm trying. Yeah, shorting. Yeah, I don't know.
Not shorting it, but when it collapsed because they were selling, properties that they didn't actually own.
Yes, that's exactly the same thing. Yeah, it's a classic like financial tool.
Yeah.
And so this creates sort of a weird situation where it's sort of like you have a market that everyone's really connected to, and landowners, even though they don't necessarily want to be reliant on the money that their land is worth, kind of have become reliant on it. But the market, they are almost blocked from going into. They're in a sense that because they have to give up control to the broker. The brokers are the ones making deals. Like if you hang out around like the land revenue office where all the deals happen, and what's fascinating is you never see owners, and you never see sellers. You never see sellers. You never see buyers. You just see brokers. It's all the brokers talking to each other.
Oh, interesting.
So one of the arguments that I've been trying to make is that the brokers, what they do is they have essentially displaced families from the market. They've displaced buyers and sellers from the market. Does that make sense?
It makes sense. So do you not know of any, would it not be possible for somebody to sell his own land, or the family to sell?
It is possible, and it does happen.
Yeah.
Rarely does. Most of the time you go
because it's just too complicated.
It's just too complicated, and it's just it's always been a question to me of like why.
Yeah.
And also you tend to, again, it's like lawyers, right? There's a joke that lawyers have that like everyone hates lawyers except their own lawyer, right? Like it's brokers too. It's like everyone doesn't trust a broker except for the broker they know who's like lives as their neighbor.
Interesting.
So.
Interesting. Well, there's something similar in Russia that I was just thinking about as you were talking. There's this idea, like there's these two phrases, "Всё куплено" and "Всё продано," which means everything is bought and everything is sold.
Oh, yeah.
But actually, what people mean isn't actually that things are bought and sold, but that like everything, the control over relations, over opportunities and stuff are, bought up in this corrupt way, which seems similar. Anyway, I don't know if that's related, but I was thinking I was wondering, so I don't know much about Nepal, but I did hear about it a lot in the news recently in the summer's protests. This sort of anxiety, suspicion, does it sort of speak to the protests?
I think it does. It does in the sense that so there's a way. One of the arguments that I've been making, is that you could the way that people talk about the economy is they have this. Sometimes you get the sense of like what I call like there's a hidden economy that that what really controls the market, especially the land market. It's not the buying and selling that you have visible, right? It's happening kind of behind the scenes.
Like in the Russian case.
Yeah, like in the Russian case, right? It's happening amongst brokers that people are being displaced from, but it's also happening amongst like, politicians, the Bui Mafia. Like they're the ones who are kind of, really driving the market here. And what is, and that idea of that, what we see in the everyday is this sort of the after effects of that. So why do I've been looking at I've been talking to people, some of my friends, since these protests happened, and that people are all over the map about why they happen. I mean, everyone knows why they happen, but who actually caused the destruction. Those who don't know, they set the parliament on fire. They set the government housing on fire. The whole government had to flee. But no one is like terrible. Like people disagree about whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, or whether it'll be good for the country or bad for the country in the long run. No one seems unclear about why it happened, though. There's this sort of understanding that we aren't part of this. We're just not part of it. Like that you can see so much wealth in Kathmandu. Like Mark Lichty, who's an anthropologist out of Chicago, like was writing about this in the 90s, and like it's like this Kathmandu is cash rich. It's always been cash rich, or it's been for as long as I've known it. There's just a ton of money there, and you can see all kinds of conspicuous consumption of nice cars and buildings, and like there's new malls going up all the time. But so many people are struggling. So there's a sense that like there's clearly money here, but we're just not part of it. We're sort of separated from it. To me, like, I think it's that frustration, I think, had to have power. That there was, this is like an economic frustration argument, but that is my understanding.
But that feeling seems to be global.
It is global.
I mean, I definitely know it from other places.
And it's also, there's been a string of these kind of protests. Like, Bangladesh had this protest last year. Sri Lanka's had this protest. Indonesia's had this. I mean, this is a moment.
It also sounds like
Asia.
what my American friends talk about all the time.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think it's everywhere. And I think it's one of those, as we move to like this sort of asset, this sort of asset society, this is a problem, even for people who have the asset. Even if you own the land, you still feel left out somehow. And I think, which is actually kind of fascinating to me. Like,
there's all those Trump speeches where he talks about the elites.
Yeah.
And it's like,
no, I mean, exactly.
He's definitely very elite, but he's talking about the elites. So there's this idea of there's like being a murky kind of elite behind the scenes.
Yes.
And the deep state. Or I don't know, there's I think since the 2000s, there's been sort of this rise of New World Order conspiracy theories globally. So, various undefined murky forces behind the scenes controlling everything.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I think that's exactly it's that same sort of conspiracy theories going on around it. I mean, it's good to point out too. It's like, I mean, it was Gen Z. It was a Gen Z protest, right? Like, these are young men, the young men who have like had, have been expected to be the professionals. The parents have invested a ton of money into them.
So they're under
invest into women as well. They're also the people who are often out there in, Abu Dhabi, Saudi Arabia, making the money and sending it home. So in many ways, they have propped up this economy for 20 years. And I think they're frustrated. I mean, I've had so many like young people who come back after being abroad for like 4 or 5 years, and they've made their money, they've made their mint, and they have that same problem of like, how do I make it? Now I have money, family has land, but it eventually they just go back because they go back to Abu Dhabi because they can't find a way to like transform it into a business.
Are they in different professions?
Yeah, all over the map. I mean, some of them are like, more white collar professions, like into banking. Some of them are like different kind of artisanal professions, like wood carving. Some of them buy a taxi, like different kinds of things like that.
No, interesting. So do you think the expats actually fueled the protests?
I think a lot of the people who are there, it's a frustration of the sense that the only way that I can make money is to go abroad and send money home.
There's no place.
There's just nothing here. I mean, that's been the case in Nepal for 30 years. And that's increasingly the case now. And I think, so you send money home, but that's also like what's causing this inflation. Like, it's like on one hand, okay, I'm doing okay, but I have to put my life in suspension. And then I also have to, I'm not making anything. Like I'm sending money home that's making everything more expensive. And I'm going to come home and I'm just going to have to go abroad again and do the same thing. So I think people are very aware of this. And behind it all is this sort of, political elite. It's been the same people for 20 years. There's a frustration there.
So do you think the suspicion that is spoken of the brokers, that they're like skimming?
Yes.
You said, or like, that they're basically like
skimming, capturing, that kind of thing.
Putting through deals which are not actually the deals that they have promised to put through and are getting, sort of the difference, making money on the difference. Is that the same suspicion that's aimed at the government? Or is it a different one?
I think it's a little different.
Yeah.
And I think it's different because people recognize that the brokers or whoever are not actually the people. They're not the elite.
Okay.
Like, the stereotypical image of a broker is this sort of less educated, middle-aged guy with like kind of, with a backpack and like comfortable shoes and a hat. And he's the backpack full of like, different like land documents. And they're considered kind of, there's a class division here. There's a sort of, they get, classed as like a lower class, I would say, even if they're higher caste because they have to be landowners. What I think what brokers have though is that they've figured. My argument is that people see brokers of having figured out how to make money on this whole hidden economy, asset society thing, where they have found ways to insert themselves into that and skim from the kind of hidden capital that's kind of moving behind the scenes. One argument that I've tried to make is that, for a landowner, land is that's just land. I mean, it has its own value. The value is because it's fetishized as part of the land. Weirdly, I think brokers sometimes, especially when I would talk to them, their approach to land, it's almost a sort of unfetishized. It's almost like, I wouldn't say Marxist, but it has this sort of like, they understand that that land's value is from the relationships. They understand that it's land's value. They see land as an access point. Like that's the idea. Is like if you can capture land and control it for a little while, then you can reach through the land and pull out the money that's kind of circulating within the land market. It's it's a very different way of thinking about ownership, actually.
Because they don't actually own it.
They don't own it, exactly. And I think people, on one hand, for like a very kind of standard ownership mentality, that's kind of, it's sacrilegious. Like I think,
I could see why the owners are upset with this.
Yeah, like I would be upset
because you own the land.
I don't like that at all. It's my money.
Like, it's your land.
But there's also a grudging respect to it, right?
Interesting.
Like one of the words that you always hear when people like tell their horror stories about brokers, or someone who stole their land or a friend's land, or did whatever. It's bato. It's clever. Everyone's clever. There's like brokers are very clever. And clever, I mean, I think it's the same in English, has kind of a mixed moral valence of like...
Clever like a fox.
Yeah, clever like a fox, exactly. Yeah. Clever, cunning. Like bato is kind of both at the same time. And then there's like, and then there's the reverse of it, which is sort of simple, which is sort of a simple person is someone who's like very innocent, probably morally upstanding.
Oh, interesting. So not a simpleton, but just a nice guy.
Well, this is the thing. I mean, it's both. It's like it's the exact. To me, it's like the binary there. Yeah. The clever, cunning, the simple simpleton. Like it's like they are the upstanding sort of like gentle soul who just does what they want to do and wants a nice life, but also they're the ones who are always getting cheated. And so it's like what's attractive about brokers is that they're clever enough to do the thing that other people are struggling to do. You know what I mean? Like everyone is trying to figure out how to access all this money in the city. Brokers have figured it out. At least that's the stereotype. And what you've seen in the last 15 years is this sort of massive increase of the number of people who are trying to be land brokers. Like, and when I would go and hang out again around the revenue office where all the brokers would hang out, there's so many young people now. Like it's, even though the stereotype of the middle-aged balding man still exists, it's like, that is not my image is like 22 to 32.
The same Gen Z
exactly. It's the same, all of these young men who are like, they're not married. They, they have no, they live with their parents, like they live at homes, they have they're landowners, they don't have to pay rent. But they're having trouble finding a job, and then they find these jobs and they pay nothing, and you have to travel across town. The hours are terrible. And they can become a broker where, one good sale and you will make more money than you would make in an office in 6 months.
That sounds like the startup economy in the US.
Is it what?
The startup economy.
Yeah, it's very similar to a startup economy. It's exactly, it's this get rich quick kind of thing. Exactly that. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I want to, the question to both of you, is what kind of broader hypothesis or question do you think we can discern from these common concerns of suspicion? And now I see a couple of things. One is that suspicion in contrast to resentment. And for people who are in the street and they see the elite and the politician, you said they are always there for the last 30 years and etc. There's no suspicion there. I mean, they think it's very clear. These are people, I mean, it's not us and we are excluded. And so the anger, frustration, and the resentment drove them to the street. But yet, with brokers, not a broker as persons, but a broker as a role, as a type of this persona, suspicion, my hypothesis is that because these brokers are doing deals in a apparently legitimate manner, So people feel, okay, what is these brokers are doing? You know, there's acquisition of land and then the wealth accumulation and etc. is inherently related to all this top elite whom they resent. But yet the brokers are kind of scheming and do everything in the end is all legitimate. You know, they are like bureaucrats. They sorted out the papers. So therefore, suspicion is a reflection of a particular consciousness about the people's relation to the entire economy, is that I resent the result of all this accumulation, but yet I cannot pinpoint what went wrong, because these brokers are doing things, put a quite smooth and legitimate facade to the whole thing. So I suspect there must be something there. So this is number one thought. Second thinking behind the suspicion is that, as you said, the brokers, even they are young and they're probably not very well educated, but simply because they are doing the business, they have hand-on experience with the procedure. Actually, therefore, they are quite close to reality. They are not fooled by any fetish or false consciousness as far as land transaction is concerned. And why don't other people learn from brokers? But then, as you mentioned, if you turn yourself into, or you adopt the perspective of brokers to look at your own life, you may be very close to the reality of economy, but you are debasing yourself because you will deprive yourself of the existential value. Right? You basically turn everything to asset and commodity. It is a very realistic picture, but it's not the picture you want to live with or you can live with. So therefore, the suspicion in the second thought means a consciousness of this contradiction, that actually the world is ruled by the broker logic, but I cannot persuade myself to open the door into the broker's room of thinking. So, I mean, would be the idea of suspicion lead to this kind of structural analysis, and also in order to explain why people keep suspecting a role which actually they're very familiar with. I mean, there's nothing really mysterious, right? If you look into it, you will figure out what they are doing.
Yeah. No, those are great points. Yeah. And I think I more or less, I think I agree with both of them. I mean, I think for absolutely sure that what makes, I think your point that like we don't suspect the politicians of anything because we know they're terrible. Like there's no suspicion there. We absolutely get it. Yeah. But brokers, we do still sort of suspect of something. Even though we're like extremely familiar with them. I mean, I think your point, and I think this is sort of question like, okay, you made this point that, what makes brokers interested is that they're doing everything by the book. But there's a question of then of like, what is by the book legitimate? Like, I think, and this is what happens, especially with these like legal like people who take on sort of legal conflicts of like, someone will say, great grandfather had claim to this land and I don't think he ever got it and I want it. And so then you get the broker, and then, so someone who has the land will have a broker show up one day and it's like, we want a piece of this land. Or they got, and in that sense that people will think like, okay, this might be some sort of legal basis for this, but it doesn't feel moral. Like this is not their land. And it gets, and some of them getting more complicated. Like it's not so much true anymore, but there was a while where brokers would bribe officials in this land revenue office to go through land records and find claims that were not totally closed. And then they would just find unregistered land in that general vicinity and say like, okay, and then they'd go find the person who still had that claim and say, I'm going to sue for you for this unregistered land. If we get any of it, we'll split it. That unregistered land is owned by someone, like someone lives there. So in that sense, it's like it gets into this sort of slipperiness around like what is these sort of what is a legitimate claim or not. And I think that's sort of where brokers play, is it's sort of like you play in like what is legitimate and what's not legitimate. And I think it's, I think there is a sort of moral, I mean, like you're right, there is this sort of moral hesitancy. And this is like the classic brokerage stuff, like this idea that what makes a broker morally disputed, and brokers are morally disputed almost globally. It's fascinating. Like you've worked at brokers, like like no one likes a broker, even though everyone uses them. And it's because they commodify things that you're not supposed to commodify. And this, with land, I mean, that's huge. And like land, definitely, it's like, I mean, it's the foundation of the family. But what's interesting, it was interesting to me is that families also want to commodify their land, right? They want to use it as a financial asset. It's not whether I should or should not do this. It's that how do I do this in a way that's like going to keep my family going. And I think it's brokers become this sort of like, the image is that they do know how to do it, but they may not be doing it for you. And you never can like quite trust them in that sense.
And they're doing it for themselves.
They're doing it for themselves.
Yeah. Which actually, one of the things I think is really interesting about what you're saying with this idea of skimming, which actually gets back to what you were saying about resentment versus suspicion.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it was good.
With the political upheavals, right, of the summer, you said, well, the political class, it's a different type of suspicion, right? And then Biao said, well, it's actually resentment because we know what they're doing. And what's interesting about that is that seems to be about control.
Yeah.
So like they control everything and we resent them for it. And they might control things in ways that we don't know, but they're not skimming. That's a different thing. So in that, to me, I'm trying to tie this to the sort of the broader global feeling that we've been talking about, right? That that we all sort of feel left out of the market, or many people around the world do. And there's this rise of the New World Order theories. The classic New World Order theory is the Elders of Zion,
right?
And that's about control.
Yeah, they control the world.
They control the world, which is not what you're saying. You're saying that they're skimming from the world. So that seems to be a different structure, right? They're skimming from the market. So the broker is skimming. And in a way, like that's what we're supposed to be doing, right? I mean, if you look, there's all these apps, like coin shaving apps, that, like from every transaction, they will take like half a penny or whatever, or the penny, and they will put it in a special account, and then they'll go into your savings, or you can donate it or whatever. Like we're all encouraged to skim all the time. So there does seem to be something new to this particular type of suspicion, which is different than resentment.
But I think, I was going to say, I really did, I meant to say that what I was talking about earlier, because I really do like this, like the connection between resentment and suspicion, which I hadn't thought about before. And I think that's really appropriate. And I think the reason I find it so appropriate is because it's like, you resent the elite and you're suspicious of the broker. Like it's sort of how you see it. Like, and that's, to get into this sort of the difference between skimming and like the sort of control, the elite controls, the broker skims. And sort of like at this, when I think about the larger implications of this kind of work, I think the idea of the hidden economy is, there's always been this notion that like the economy is not something you could see. And that's like the real decisions are always happening behind the door, behind closed doors. But I think as we move into sort of a more financialized, asset-based economy, that just becomes increasingly exemplified and increasingly, it just becomes the basis of all ideas of the economy. So this idea of the hidden economy is growing.
Although what's interesting with the apps and the skimming is that it's actually not behind closed doors. We all know they're doing it. In fact, we ourselves are encouraged to do it. Like we're told this is how the market now runs. The more you have, the more you skim. Which is totally unfair, but we all know that this is how it's going, and that's what's interesting to me about that.
And there's increasingly how, so much, like you think of like, I brought this, I presented this work in a workshop we had like a few weeks ago in Cambridge, and like the woman who was our discussant, who worked in this, a geographer, was like, she was talking about like, financial managers, and this sort of like how much of like, of their money goes to these financial managers, or there's sort of this incredible, like, intermediary skimming economy that's being built around these kind of large asset pools, not just like land, but also just, pension funds and everything,
Sure.
That's where the money's being made. And that's where you have to position yourself. And I think there's, what I'm trying to do with suspicion is to sort of think what kind of like affective position does this put people in?
Yes.
Who are faced with this economy.
Yes.
And I think suspicion is a really important way of thinking about the economy and thinking about skimming. Like, I don't think we have a good enough language for skimming yet. I think there needs to be better language for what that means as a mode of accumulation and what it means to live in an economy where the only way to succeed is to skim or to capture. I go,
I mean, in a way, it's rent, right? If you have money invested and then you're skimming from it, that's like taking rent.
It's kind of renty, yeah.
It's renty.
Yeah.
But it's different because it's like actually getting rent from land is bad.
Yeah.
And skimming it's sort of bad and suspicious, but we sort of also emulate it. It's kind of both.
Yeah. And there's a certain labor that goes. I mean, one of the things about brokers, to brokers' credit, is it's hard work.
Yeah.
It's not easy to do. And most of them fail. Like most of those 20-somethings I met, none of them make it. Like not all, some of them make it, but the vast majority do it for a few years, decide they can't, this is not making any money, they go do something else. Yeah. Some of them keep going, but like very, very vanishingly few will do what they all want to do, which is to make their mint and then start buying land and become developers. Like that's the career path as it's understood. And I did not see a single instance of that actually happening. Maybe if I had longer time to research, but I don't think it's very rare. And there's something interesting about brokerage too, where it's like once you do the work, your work vanishes. Like your position there, like the transaction happens, and then you disappear entirely from it, which is good in the sense that makes it easy to take money, but it's also bad in the sense that it's like hard to like justify it because it's what did you do really? Like it looks like you didn't do anything.
Yeah.
So that's the difference between rent. Like rent, you can't just ideally you can just sit and not do anything.
Yeah,
you can just collect money. Yeah. Like you are working as a broker.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I see. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yes, that's great. So my probably final question also to both of you, and I think the traceless, of course, is a very important feature of skimming. Right? Yeah. Skimming is supposed to constantly doing something, but without leaving any trace in its own right.
Yes.
And it's constantly leveraging other parts of economy. So my final question is that do you think, so where really the entire world is further going deeper into the crisis of trust. If we think, the economy is becoming more and more driven by speculation, and for speculation, you need some organizers who organize speculation. And for ordinary people, like these small landowners in Kathmandu, as you said, they want to gain profit from land and gain profit from the game of speculation. But at the same time, they are very reluctant to do so. They feel it is not nice, morally challenging, and upset all the family relations and etc. So as you said, it's really put them in a very effective position to the game of speculation. But they still do it because of money and etc. So what is the result? The result is that there's more and more people facilitate your speculation, and more people become target of suspicion. And therefore, in totality, social trust fades away. Therefore, on one hand, you need more and more brokers to facilitate, to sort out the paper, because you can't trust anything else. You need to trust your brokers by paying a lot. But in the end, you just feel that there is very little to trust, and then you accept as really the cash, hard cash that enter to your bank account. At that moment, you can sigh with a sense of relief. So I don't know whether or not you think. I mean, just thinking of speculatively. It's your story of ethnographic observation of suspicion. Would that lead to a global crisis of trust because of the economy becomes so speculative?
It's a good question. I hadn't thought about that. I don't know. I honestly don't know. I know that's like not a great ending. But like, that's the truth of it. I honestly don't know.
So what do you think?
I mean, so I think people always trust and distrust. I mean, I think as far as about humans, we're always trusting and distrusting. But what's interesting is we're trusting certain things, not trusting other things. But what's interesting is the logics by which people trust and not trust. So what I think is interesting in what you're showing with the skimming is that actually I do think it's a different logic.
Yeah.
I think the logic of suspicion that they're skimming is different than the logic of suspicion of they're controlling everything.
Yeah.
And I think to me that shows kind of a popular, maybe global, grumbling ideology, however you want to call it, feelings about a economic shift.
I like the idea of a grumbling ideology because I think that is actually because that is my response. My response is that I don't think it's a culture of distrust. What I think is this sort of like an increasing valorization of skimming. Like increasing you're like, that's just what we have to do. Like I know quite a few instances where like, a friend wanted to buy a taxi. So his like best friend from when they were like 5 years old, like helped him get a taxi of it and skimmed like $500 off it. And like, they found out, he didn't tell them at the time, they found out later, he was fine with it. And his brother was not. Like it was sort of like, it wasn't exactly like clean, morally speaking, but there's this
He was okay with it? He forgave the guy?
Was that?
He forgave him?
He didn't even feel bad about it.
Wow. That's like, amazing.
I was offended. And his brother was like very offended. Wow. But like I was like, amazing. But he was fine with it.
Does the guy just have terrible self-esteem?
Like, was that?
Does he just have terrible self-esteem?
I don't know. I mean, it's only, it's anthropology, so it's like, talking, control group of one. But like, I think, but this, I know there's quite a few instances of like, people do skim, people do take commissions. And I think there's a sense of like, that's okay, No. But where the line is it's constantly negotiated and it's very messy. So I think that would be my answer to it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It has been a great conversation. And thank you very much for joining us. And see you next time. Goodbye.
Bye.
Common Concerns Podcast.